The last thing Eric Holland needed was another mouth to feed, especially one with sharp teeth and an appetite that seemed bottomless. He stared at the final morsel of his ration bar with resignation. It wasn't much. The synthetic protein had the consistency of wet cardboard and tasted vaguely of chemicals, but it was all he had left. His fingers tightened around it as his stomach growled in protest. Cerberus Station hummed with the constant noise of too many beings crammed into too little space. The refugees had been pouring in for months now, ever since the Meridian conflict had destroyed half a dozen habitable worlds. The station, once a minor waypoint for traders and miners, now bulged at its seams with the desperate and displaced. Eric leaned against the grimy wall of the commerce sector, trying to look inconspicuous. He'd just lost his biggest paycheck in years when his client had vanished without a trace, along with the advance Eric had used to fuel his ship and stock supplies. Now he was stranded until he could find another job, which wouldn't be easy in this market. That's when he saw her. She was partially hidden in the shadows of a maintenance alcove, but even hunched over, she was tall, at least a head taller than him. Her body was covered in short amber fur, with darker markings across her shoulders and back. Her eyes caught the dim station light, reflecting back with an eerie golden glow. Despite her obvious hunger, her lean frame made that clear enough. There was something proud in the way she held herself. Those eyes were fixed on a ration bar in his hand. Eric hesitated. He should just eat it and walk away. It wasn't his problem that some refugee Beastwoman was hungry. Everyone on Cerberus was hungry these days. But something in those wild eyes made him pause. Maybe it was the lack of pleading in them. She wasn't begging. She was simply watching, as if cataloging the movements of potential prey. Damn it, Eric muttered to himself. Before he could reconsider, he took a step toward her and extended his hand with the ration bar. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, with a swiftness that startled him, she snatched the food from his palm. Her fingers were long, tipped with retractable claws that had just barely grazed his skin. She devoured the bar in 2 bites, sharp teeth making quick work of the dense protein. As she swallowed, her eyes closed briefly in what might have been relief. Then she stood to her full height, and Eric had to crane his neck to look up at her. She was easily 7 feet tall, with a lean, muscular build. Her face had feline aspects, a slightly flattened nose, high cheekbones, and those unnerving golden eyes, but was undeniably humanoid. "You have fed me," she said, her voice surprisingly melodic despite its guttural undertones. "Now I am bound to you. I am Yelana, and you're my provider. I belong to you." Eric blinked, certain he'd misheard. "What? It is our way," she continued solemnly. "To give food in times of famine creates a sacred bond. I am sworn to you now." "Look," Eric raised his hands, "I was just being nice. I don't want anything from you, and I certainly don't want you to belong to me. That's not how things work here." She tilted her head, studying him as if he were speaking nonsense. "The bond is not about want. It simply is." "Well, is it?" Eric snapped, his patience fraying. "I've got enough problems without adding weird cultural obligations to the list." Yelana merely straightened her shoulders, as if his objections were expected but irrelevant. "Thanks for the chat, but I need to get back to my ship," Eric said, turning to leave. He had to find a job, and quickly, if he wanted to get off this overcrowded tin can. He made his way through the packed corridors, occasionally glancing back to ensure he wasn't being followed. By the 3rd time he checked, he was confident he'd lost her. Relief washed over him as he approached the docking bay where the Nomad was berthed. The Nomad wasn't much to look at, an old Corvus-class transport vessel with mismatched hull panels and outdated systems. But it was home. It was also one of the few things Eric could truly call his own, even if the bank technically still held a lien on it. As he approached the ship's entry ramp, he punched in his access code and waited for the airlock to cycle open. The familiar hydraulic hiss was a small comfort. "Eric, finally!" Jax called from the engine room as soon as he stepped inside. The ship's mechanic appeared in the corridor, goggles pushed up into his mess of copper hair, face streaked with lubricant. "The secondary coolant system is acting up again. I've patched it for now, but we should really consider." Jax stopped mid-sentence, his eyes widening as he looked past Eric. Who's your friend? With a sinking feeling, Eric turned around. Yolana stood in the airlock doorway, utterly silent, her tall frame nearly touching the ceiling. How the hell did you get on my ship? Eric demanded. I followed, she stated simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I didn't see you. You were not meant to. From the cockpit came the sound of heavy footsteps. Reese, the Nomad's aging pilot, appeared, his weathered face scrunched into a deeper scowl than usual. What's this animal doing on my deck? He growled, his hand hovering near the blaster at his hip. Your deck. Eric raised an eyebrow. And she's not an animal. Well, I don't actually know what she is, but she's sentient. I am Kthar, Yolana said, as if that explained everything. Well, Kthar or not, she's not staying, Reese insisted. We've got enough problems without adding stowaways. I am bound to the provider, Yolana said, nodding toward Eric. Where he goes, I go. Jax stifled what sounded suspiciously like a laugh. Provider, huh? What did you do, Eric? I gave her a stupid ration bar. Eric sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, Yolana, was it? This is all a big misunderstanding. I'm sure your cultural traditions are very important, but I'm not looking for whatever this is. I got a ship to run, jobs to find, and frankly, another person to feed is the last thing I need right now. I require little, she said, and I will earn my keep. Ow! Reese challenged. Yolana turned her unnerving gaze to the old pilot. I can fight, hunt, track, kill, if necessary. The matter-of-fact way she listed these skills sent a chill down Eric's spine. Great, he muttered. Just what we need. A professional killer. Jax was still grinning. I don't know, boss. Might be handy to have someone like her around, especially with the kind of ports we've been hitting lately. Eric glared at him, then looked back at Yolana. She stood perfectly still, waiting for his decision with inhuman patience. One night, he finally conceded. You can stay one night. In the morning, we'll figure something out. Yolana bowed her head slightly. As you wish, provider. Eric groaned inwardly. His life, which had already been circling the drain, had just gotten considerably more complicated. For 3 days, Eric tried to ignore his unwanted passenger. Yolana had claimed a corner of the cargo hold as her own, arranging a few shipping blankets into what passed for a nest. She spoke little, ate sparingly from the ship's meager stores, and spent most of her time observing the crew with those unnerving golden eyes. Jax, naturally, was fascinated by her. He'd attempt to engage her in conversation whenever their paths crossed, asking about her people and culture. Yolana would respond with brief, often cryptic answers that only fueled the mechanic's curiosity. Reese, on the other hand, made his displeasure known at every opportunity. He would mutter about the beast contaminating his ship, despite Eric's repeated reminders that the Nomad belonged to him, not Reese. She's going to cause trouble, the old pilot warned on the third night, as he and Eric shared a bottle of synthesized whiskey in the galley. Mark my words. Her kind always do. Her kind. Eric raised an eyebrow. You've encountered Kthar before? Reese took a swig from his glass. Not personally, no, but I've heard stories. Warriors, the lot of them. Bred for combat. They were big news a decade or two back, then they just disappeared. Most folks think they got wiped out in some war or another. Eric frowned. That didn't match with Yolana's refugee appearance, but then again, it would explain her otherworldly intensity and the predatory grace with which she moved. Still, he had more pressing concerns than his uninvited guest's mysterious background. The ship's coffers were dangerously low. Without a paying job soon, they'd be forced to sell parts of the Nomad just to afford fuel, an option Eric refused to consider. It was Jax who found their potential salvation, though Eric immediately questioned the wisdom of it. Tartarus Belt? Eric stared at the navigation chart Jax had pulled up. That's practically pirate territory. The Tartarus Belt was a dense asteroid field on the outskirts of settled space, notorious for its unstable magnetic fields and the opportunistic raiders who used them to mask their approach. It's a simple pickup and delivery, Jax argued. The mining station there has been abandoned for months, but the client wants to retrieve some specialized equipment before the scavengers get to it. We go in, load up, drop off at coordinates they provide, get paid. Easy. Nothing involving the Tartarus belt is easy, Eric countered. He turned to Reese. What do you think? The old pilot scratched his stubbled chin. It's risky, but not impossible. I can navigate the magnetic disturbances. Wouldn't be the first time. Eric studied the payout figure again. It was substantial, enough to cover their expenses for 2 months if they were careful. And they were running out of options. Fine, he sighed. Tell them we'll take the job. 2 days later, they were approaching the outer edge of the Tartarus belt. The occasional small asteroid drifted past the viewports, harbingers of the dense field ahead. Magnetic interference increasing, Reese announced from the pilot's seat. Sensors will be compromised once we're inside the belt proper. Eric nodded, staring at the readouts. Something didn't feel right. The client had been too eager, the payment too generous for what should have been a straightforward salvage job. He felt a presence behind him and turned to find Yelena standing there, her posture tense. Problem? He asked. She inhaled deeply, as if scenting the recycled ship air. There's cold steel and waiting, she said, her voice low. Eric frowned. What does that mean? Danger, she clarified, her ear twitching slightly. Something lies in ambush. Sensors aren't picking up any other ships, Jax reported, checking the displays. They wouldn't, in this magnetic soup, Reese grumbled. Eric hesitated. Every instinct told him to turn back, but the need for credits pushed him forward. Proceed, he ordered, but be ready for trouble. The abandoned mining station came into view as they cleared a cluster of larger asteroids. It was a skeletal structure attached to a hollowed-out rock, its exterior lights dark, except for a few emergency beacons still pulsing weakly. No communication from the station, Jax noted. Should be an automated response at minimum. Life support still functioning? Eric asked. Jax checked the readings. Barely. Atmosphere's thin but breathable. Eric made his decision. Reese, dock us. Jax, prep for equipment loading. I'll go in first to assess. I will accompany you, Yelena stated. It wasn't a request. Eric started to refuse, then reconsidered. If there was trouble, having her along might not be the worst idea. Fine, but you follow my lead. The docking procedure went smoothly, too smoothly in Eric's experience. A functioning docking system on an abandoned station was unusual. As the airlock cycled, he drew his sidearm, a refurbished Meridian pulse pistol that had seen better days. Yelena carried no visible weapons, but somehow that made her seem more dangerous, not less. The station interior was dim, emergency lighting casting long shadows across empty corridors. Their footsteps echoed unnaturally in the silence. Equipment should be in main storage, Eric whispered, checking his handheld scanner. 2 levels down. Yelena moved beside him, her steps utterly silent despite her size. Her nostrils flared continuously, and her ears swiveled like radar dishes, catching sounds beyond human perception. They reached a junction, and Yelena suddenly stopped, one arm shooting out to halt Eric. 8, she whispered. Armed. Waiting. Before Eric could respond, the lights suddenly blazed to full intensity, momentarily blinding him. When his vision cleared, he found himself staring down the barrels of multiple weapons held by figures in mismatched combat gear. Pirates or mercenaries, it was hard to tell the difference these days. Well, drawled the apparent leader, a scarred human with cybernetic eye implants. Right on schedule. Your reputation for punctuality is well-deserved, Holland. Eric kept his weapon pointed at the man, though he knew he was outnumbered. I don't believe we've met. The man's metallic eyes gleamed. No, but our mutual friend spoke highly of you. So trusting, so desperate for work. The perfect courier. There's no equipment, is there? Eric realized. Oh, there's equipment, the man chuckled. Just not the kind you were expecting to transport. One of the other mercenaries stepped forward. Enough chat. Secure them and signal the main ship. That's when Yelena moved. One moment she was standing beside Eric, tense but still. The next, she was a blur of motion. She crossed the space between them and the mercenaries in a heartbeat, her body low, arms extended. The first mercenary had no time to react before Yelana's claws ripped through his body armor, as if it were paper. The second managed to fire a wild shot that went wide before she snapped his neck with a single, fluid motion. The others opened fire, but Yelana was already moving again, using the dead mercenaries as momentary shields before launching herself at the next targets. Eric, snapping out of his shock, took cover and began firing at the remaining attackers. But he needn't have bothered. In less than 30 seconds, it was over. Yelana stood amid the carnage, her breathing only slightly elevated. Blood, not her own, splattered her fur in dark patterns. 2 mercenaries had fled, but the rest lay dead or dying around her. "We should leave," she said calmly, as if she hadn't just torn through 6 armed combatants like a force of nature. "The others will return with reinforcements." Eric found his voice. "What? Who are you?" "Really?" Yelana met his gaze, her eyes still glinting with the intensity of battle. "I am bound to protect my provider," she said simply. "That is all you need to know for now." They returned to the Nomad in stunned silence. The mission had been a trap, though its purpose remained unclear. No payment would be forthcoming, and they'd likely made new enemies in the process. Reese and Jax were waiting at the airlock, having monitored the situation from a ship. Jax's eyes widened at the blood on Yelana's fur, while Reese's hand went instinctively to his blaster. "What happened?" Jax demanded. "Ambush," Eric replied tersely. "Reese, get us out of here. Maximum burn as soon as we're clear of the belt." As the ship pulled away from the station, Eric confronted Yelana in the cargo hold. "You're not just some refugee," he stated. "What you did back there, that was military training. Professional." Yelana regarded him steadily. "I am Kthar," she repeated. Were warriors." "Were." A shadow passed across her features. "My people are few now. Scattered. Hunted. By whom?" She turned away. "By those who fear what we are. What we know." It wasn't much of an answer, but Eric sensed it was all he would get for now. As he left the cargo hold, he noticed that Reese was keeping even more distance from Yelana than before. But there was a new emotion mixed with the pilot's suspicion now: fear. The atmosphere aboard the Nomad shifted after the incident at the mining station. Reese no longer complained about the beast in his presence, instead maintaining a wary silence whenever Yelana was nearby. Jax's fascination had evolved into respectful curiosity, often watching her from a distance but rarely approaching directly. As for Eric, he found himself in the uncomfortable position of owing his life to someone he'd been trying to get rid of. Moreover, he couldn't shake the feeling that Yelana's presence on his ship wasn't as coincidental as it had first appeared. Their financial situation grew increasingly dire. The failed mission had cost them fuel and supplies with nothing to show for it. Eric was considering selling some of their non-essential equipment when an encrypted transmission came through on a rarely used frequency. The message was brief: a lucrative transport offer, pick up at Relay Point Sigma, delivery to coordinates in uncharted space locally known as the Void. Half payment in advance, the remainder on delivery. The cargo was described only as specialty biocontainment, sealed, high priority. "Smells like trouble," Reese commented when Eric shared the details. "Especially after what happened at Tartarus." "It also smells like enough credits to keep us flying for half a year," Eric countered. "We're not exactly drowning in options here." Jax examined the technical specifications that had accompanied the offer. "The containment unit they want us to transport is pretty sophisticated. Triple sealed, self-powered, requires minimal environmental control. Whatever's inside is valuable." "Or dangerous," Reese muttered. "Or both," Eric sighed. "But we need this job." They set course for Relay Point Sigma, a bustling transit hub that existed in a legal gray area. Not exactly unlawful, but not particularly concerned with regulations either. The kind of place where questions weren't asked as long as the right palms were greased. Eric noticed that Yelana seemed unusually tense as they approached the station, her movements even more controlled than usual. When he questioned her about it, she merely said, "This place has many secrets. We should be vigilant." Relay Point Sigma hummed with activity, ships of all descriptions docking and departing at all hours. The station's central promenade was crowded with traders, fixers, and others whose professions were less easily defined. The contact point was a secluded loading bay in the station's lower levels. Eric instructed Jax and Reese to remain with the ship while he and Yelena went to meet the client. "Are you sure taking her is a good idea?" Jax asked quietly. "She's not exactly inconspicuous. That's precisely why I want her with me," Eric replied. "After Tartarus, I'm not walking into any more traps unarmed." The loading bay was dimly lit and smelled of industrial lubricants. Their contact was already waiting, a figure completely covered in an environmental suit and mask that obscured any identifying features. "Captain Holland," the figure greeted him, voice distorted through the mask's filter. "I appreciate your punctuality. Let's skip the pleasantries," Eric replied. "Show me the cargo and the payment." The figure gestured to a sleek metallic container positioned on a hovercart nearby. It was roughly the size of a large coffin, its surface interrupted only by a small control panel and status indicators that pulsed with a soft blue light. "The first payment has already been transferred to your account," the figure stated. "You can verify it now." Eric checked his comm unit, which confirmed the substantial deposit. "What exactly am I transporting?" "The less you know, the better for all involved," the contact replied smoothly. "The container is self-sustaining and requires no intervention. Simply deliver it to the provided coordinates." Eric was about to press further when he noticed Yelena's reaction. She had gone completely rigid, her focus fixed on the container with an intensity that seemed to radiate from her entire being. "Is your associate all right?" the contact asked, a note of concern in the filtered voice. "She's fine," Eric said quickly. "We'll take the job." "Coordinates received?" The figure nodded. "Transmitted to your ship's navigation system. I advise prompt delivery. The contents are time-sensitive." As soon as the container was loaded aboard the Nomad and they were safely away from Relay Point Sigma, Eric confronted Yelena in the cargo bay where the mysterious container had been secured. "You recognized it," he stated. "Or what's inside it? What aren't you telling me?" Yelena's eyes hadn't left the container since it had been brought aboard. "You should not have accepted this task," she said quietly. "A little late for that," Eric snapped. "What's in there?" Instead of answering, Yelena placed a hand on the container's smooth surface. The pulsing lights seemed to beat faster at her touch. "Jax," Eric called over the ship's comm. "I want a detailed scan of this container. Full spectrum." While they waited for Jax to set up the scanning equipment, Eric studied Yelena's expression. For the first time since he'd met her, she appeared genuinely unsettled. "Is it dangerous?" he asked in a softer tone. "All power is dangerous," she replied cryptically. "It depends on who wields it." Jax arrived with a portable scanner and began taking readings of the container. "It's shielded," he reported after a few minutes. "But there are some energy signatures coming through that I've never seen before. Definitely not standard cargo." At Eric's instruction, Jax configured the scanner to penetrate the container's outer shielding. The results appeared as a holographic projection above the device. Inside the sleek exterior was what appeared to be a crystalline structure, roughly spherical, pulsing with an internal light that shifted between colors and patterns too complex to track. It seemed almost alive, in a way that made Eric's skin crawl. Yelena's reaction was visceral. Her pupils contracted to pinpoints, and her breathing became rapid and shallow. "Starheart," she whispered, the word carrying a weight of reverence and fear. "What is a Starheart?" Eric demanded. Yelena finally tore her gaze from the container to look at him directly. "It is our legacy, our memory, our power." Her voice was strained. "And it should not be in this metal coffin, carried like contraband." Eric exchanged a glance with Jax, who looked equally confused. "I need more than mystical pronouncements, Yelena. What exactly are we transporting?" For a long moment, she was silent. Then, with obvious reluctance, she began to speak. "My people, the Kthar, were once a great civilization. We were warriors, yes, but also scholars, artisans, explorers. We maintained balance in our sector of space for millennia." Her gaze drifted back to the container. "The Starheart was our most sacred artifact. It contains the essence of our collective knowledge, our history, our very being. Like a data repository? Jack suggested. Yolana shook her head. More. It is living memory, captured and preserved through means your science cannot yet comprehend. It was kept in our most sacred temple, guarded by our most devoted warriors. So how did it end up in a container on a shady space station? Eric asked. Yolana's expression darkened. Betrayal. From within and without. A faction among my people, corrupted by promises of power, allied with our ancient enemies, those you would call the corruptors. They attacked when we were most vulnerable during the Great Communion ceremony. She paused, the memory clearly painful. The temple fell. Most of the guardians died, defending it. The Star Heart was taken. I and a few others escaped, scattered across the stars. And these corruptors, Eric pressed. What do they want with the Star Heart? To unlock its power. To use it to complete the extinction of my people. Perhaps to harness its energy for their own technology. Yolana's claws extended unconsciously. They had been hunting any remaining pieces of Cthar technology or artifacts for years. So the coordinates we're heading to, Jax began, is almost certainly a trap, Yolana confirmed. The corruptors want the Star Heart delivered to them, and they are using you as unwitting couriers. Eric rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building. Perfect. Just perfect. He looked back at the container. So what do we do with it now? Yolana's answer was immediate. We must not deliver it to them. The Star Heart must be protected at all costs. And if we don't deliver it, Jax asked, we don't get the rest of our payment, and we'll have some very dangerous people after us. They would come for you regardless, Yolana said grimly. The corruptors leave no witnesses, no loose ends. Eric considered their options, none of which seemed particularly appealing. First things first. Jax, tell Reese to alter our course. We're not heading directly to the delivery coordinates. We'll approach cautiously, scope out the situation. And then, Jax asked. Eric glanced at Yolana, then back at the container. Then we decide. The region of space, known as the Void, lived up to its ominous name. Sparsely populated with stars and virtually uncharted, it was avoided by most travelers due to peculiar spatial anomalies that made navigation treacherous. A perfect place for a clandestine exchange, or an ambush. Eric stood on a Nomad's bridge, studying the long-range scanner data. They were maintaining a cautious distance from the coordinates they'd been given, using a nearby nebula to mask their approach. Anything, he asked Reese, who was monitoring the sensor array. The old pilot shook his head. Not yet, but this nebula is playing havoc with our instruments. Could be a fleet out there, and we might not detect it until we're right on top of them. Jax entered the bridge, looking concerned. The container, the Star Heart, it's becoming more active. The energy readings are fluctuating wildly. Is it dangerous? Eric asked. I don't know, Jax admitted. But Yolana is communing with it, I think. She's just sitting there, hand on the container, not moving. Eric frowned. Keep an eye on both of them. If anything changes. Contact, Reese interrupted, pointing to the scanner. Large vessel, just emerged from the far side of the nebula. Sophisticated cloaking technology, it only showed up when they adjusted position. Eric studied the readout. The ship was significantly larger than the Nomad, with a design he didn't recognize. Military? No identifiable markings, Reese reported. But it's well armed. Multiple weapon systems active and scanning. They haven't spotted us yet. Doesn't look like it. The nebula's still providing cover. Eric made a quick decision. Maintain position. Let's see what they do. They watched as the mysterious vessel moved toward the designated coordinates, eventually coming to a stop at what appeared to be an ancient structure floating in space. A massive, partially destroyed edifice that looked both organic and mechanical in nature. What is that thing? Jax whispered. A Cthar outpost, came Yolana's voice from behind them. She had entered the bridge silently, her eyes glowing with an inner light that hadn't been there before. One of our boundary markers. They desecrate it with their presence. Eric studied her with concern. Are you all right? Jack said you were interacting with the Star Heart. It recognizes me, she said simply. It is awakening after long dormancy. Is that good or bad? Yolana's gaze shifted to the view screen showing the ancient structure. It depends on what happens next. The star heart is powerful but unstable. In the wrong hands, or if improperly handled, it could be catastrophic. Define catastrophic, Reese demanded. At minimum, the destruction of this ship and everything within several thousand kilometers, Yolana replied calmly. At worst, a tear in the fabric of space-time that could expand unpredictably. Wonderful, Eric muttered. So we're carrying a potential space-time bomb. Look, Jax pointed to the view screen. They're launching something. A smaller craft had detached from the large vessel and was approaching the ancient structure. Shall I move us closer? Reese asked. We could try to get a better view of what they're doing. Eric hesitated, then nodded. Carefully, keep us within the nebula's edge. As the Nomad edged closer, they could see the smaller craft docking with the derelict Thar outpost. Shortly after, several figures emerged, moving toward what appeared to be a central chamber in the structure. Can we get any visuals inside? Eric asked. Jax adjusted the sensors. Negative. Too much interference. They prepare the site, Yolana said, her voice distant. They believe the Star Heart will activate ancient systems within the outpost. They are partially correct. What will it actually do? Eric asked. Yolana's eyes met his. It will recognize that they are not Thar. The results will be unpredictable, so we just wait and let them destroy themselves? Reese suggested. No. Yolana's response was forceful. The Star Heart must not be lost again, and its power, unleashed without proper guidance, could be far more destructive than you imagine. Before Eric could respond, Reese tensed. We've been spotted. The main vessel is changing course, heading straight for us. Evasive maneuvers. Eric ordered. Jax, charge weapons, for all the good they'll do against that. Behemoth. The Nomad lurched as Reese spun the ship away from the approaching threat, diving deeper into the nebula. They're hailing us, Jax reported. Eric nodded. Put it through. A figure appeared on the view screen, humanoid but not human, with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that shimmered with an inner light similar to what Eric had just observed in Yolana's. But where hers had seemed alive, these appeared artificial, mechanical. Captain Holland, the figure spoke, its voice unnaturally smooth. You have something that belongs to us. Your deviation from the assigned course is disappointing. I don't deal with anonymous clients, Eric replied, stalling for time as Reese maneuvered the ship through the nebula's gaseous tendrils. I am Magister Zorex of the Ascendancy, the figure stated, and you have in your possession an artifact of tremendous value. Return it immediately, and you may yet survive this encounter. Yolana stepped forward, placing herself in view of the transmission. Corruptor, she hissed, the word filled with ancient hatred. Zorex's expression shifted, genuine surprise breaking through the composed facade. A Cthar survivor. How? Unexpected. The alien's focus returned to Eric. Captain, your situation has become considerably more complicated. The Beastwoman is deceiving you. The artifact she protects is unstable, dangerous. We seek only to contain it safely. Lies, Yolana snarled. They wish to drain the Star Heart, to use its power to fuel their abominations and erase all trace of my people from existence. Zorex's expression hardened. You have 1 minute to surrender the artifact, Captain. After that, we will take it from your corpse. The transmission cut off. They're powering weapons. Jax warned. Get us out of here. Eric ordered Reese. Maximum burn. The Nomad shuddered as its engines strained to their limits. Behind them, energy weapons lanced through the nebula, narrowly missing their stern. We can't outrun them, Reese shouted over the blaring alarms. Not in open space. The outpost, Yolana said suddenly. Take us to the Cthar outpost. The structure will recognize the Starheart. It will protect us. Are you insane? Reese protested. We be trapped. Better trapped than dead, Eric decided. Do it. Full speed to the outpost. Reese cursed but complied, swinging the ship in a tight arc back toward the ancient structure. The pursuing vessel, momentarily confused by their change in direction, adjusted its course to follow. "They're gaining," Jax warned, clinging to his console as the ship bucked and rattled. Approaching the outpost, Reese announced through gritted teeth. "Where exactly am I heading?" Yelana leaned over his console, pointing to a dark aperture in the structure's side. "There, the maintenance bay. That opening's barely big enough for us," Reese objected. "It will accommodate," Yelana insisted. Eric made a split-second decision. "Do it." The nomad hurtled toward the seemingly too small opening in the ancient structure. At the last possible moment, lines of energy flickered to life along the aperture's edge, and the opening widened just enough to allow the ship passage. They shot through into a vast, darkened chamber. Behind them, the aperture sealed itself, energy barriers shimmering into place just as their pursuers fired another volley. The energy weapons impacted harmlessly against the suddenly activated defenses. "What the hell just happened?" Eric demanded, staring at the view screen as the chamber around them slowly illuminated with soft, amber light. "The outpost recognizes the Starheart's presence," Yelana explained, her voice tinged with both relief and reverence. "Ancient protocols have been activated, so we're safe." Jax asked hopefully. "Temporarily," Yelana replied. "The corruptors will not be deterred so easily. They will find another way in." As if to confirm her words, the ship's sensors detected multiple smaller craft deploying from the larger vessel outside, spreading out to surround the ancient structure. "Great," Eric muttered. "So, instead of being killed quickly, we get to be besieged." He turned to Yelana. "What now?" "Now," she said, "we must take the Starheart to the heart of the outpost. It can be properly awakened there. And that helps us how, exactly?" Reese demanded. "The outpost contains defenses that have lain dormant for centuries," Yelana explained. "With the Starheart active, they can be reawakened." Eric considered their options, which were admittedly few. "All right, Reese, stay with the ship. Keep it ready for a quick exit if we get the chance. Jax, you're with us. We'll need your technical expertise if we're interfacing with ancient systems." They made their way to the cargo hold where the container was secured. The pulsing of the lights had increased in frequency and now synced perfectly with a similar pulsing that emanated from the very walls of the outpost around them. "It's responding to its surroundings," Jax observed, scanning the container. "The energy patterns are shifting." "It remembers," Yelana said simply. She placed a hand on the container, and the control panel slid open beneath her touch. With practiced movements, she entered a complex sequence. The container hissed as internal locks disengaged. The top panel slid back, revealing the Starheart in all its glory. It was even more impressive than the scan had suggested. A crystalline sphere approximately 30 centimeters in diameter, pulsing with internal light that shifted through colors in complex patterns. Tiny points of brilliance swirled within it like captured stars. "It's beautiful," Jax whispered. Yelana carefully lifted the Starheart from its containment. In her hands, the pulsing light grew stronger, and Eric could swear he heard a faint, harmonious humming. "We must move quickly," she said. "The corruptors will have detected its activation." They made their way through the ancient structure, following Yelana's lead. The outpost seemed to awaken around them, dormant systems flickering to life as they passed. Doors opened automatically, and holographic displays in an unfamiliar language illuminated their path. "How do you know your way around?" Eric asked as they traversed a long corridor. "All Kthar outposts follow the same sacred geometry," Yelana replied, "and the Starheart guides me." They entered what appeared to be a vast central chamber. A pedestal stood at its center, surrounded by concentric rings of unknown technology embedded in the floor. The ceiling arched high above them, revealing a transparent dome that offered a view of the nebula and stars beyond, and the enemy ships still surrounding them. "There," Yelana indicated the pedestal. "The communion altar. The Starheart must be placed there." As they approached the center of the chamber, the floor beneath them suddenly trembled. A section of wall on the far side exploded inward in a shower of debris and energy discharge. Figures poured through the breach, sleek, armored soldiers with weapons that pulsed with the same dark energy Eric had seen on the Corruptor ship. Leading them was Magister Zorex himself, his obsidian face set in an expression of cold determination. "The Cthar relic," he demanded, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "Surrender it now." Yelana clutched the star heart tighter, backing toward the pedestal. "Never, Corruptor. You will not defile it again." Eric and Jax drew their weapons, taking cover behind ancient consoles as energy blasts began to fill the air. They returned fire, but their conventional weapons seemed to have minimal effect against the advanced armor of their attackers. "We need to get to that pedestal," Eric shouted to Yelana over the cacophony of battle. She nodded, her eyes never leaving the advancing enemy. "Cover me." Eric laid down, suppressing fire, while Jax targeted the chamber's environmental systems, creating a cloud of steam that momentarily obscured their movements. Yelana darted forward, moving with preternatural speed toward the central pedestal. Zorex saw her intention and fired a concentrated energy blast directly at her. Yelana dodged, but the blast grazed her shoulder, sending her stumbling. The star heart slipped from her grasp, rolling across the floor. "No!" she cried, diving after it. Eric rushed forward, providing covering fire as Jax circled around to flank the attackers. The star heart had come to rest just meters from the pedestal, its light pulsing erratically now, as if in distress. Yelana reached it first, her injured arm hanging limply at her side. As her fingers touched the crystal sphere, it flared brilliantly, momentarily blinding everyone in the chamber. When Eric's vision cleared, he saw Yelana standing at the pedestal, the star heart hovering just above her outstretched hands. The light within it had stabilized, but now tendrils of energy were extending from it, connecting to Yelana herself. "What's happening?" Eric shouted, still exchanging fire with the Corruptors. "The communion," Yelana replied, her voice strangely distant. "It recognizes me as Cthar. It offers its power." Zorex approached, his soldiers forming a protective phalanx around him. "You cannot control it, Beastwoman," he said, his voice almost pitying. "The power will consume you, as it did the last of your pathetic guardians." "You know nothing of true communion," Yelana retorted. With a fluid motion, she placed the star heart onto the pedestal. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The concentric rings in the floor blazed with light, and energy surged upward to envelop both the star heart and Yelana. The entire chamber hummed with power, and the holographic displays around them flared to life, showing incomprehensible data streams. Zorex fired at the pedestal, but his energy blast was absorbed by the field surrounding Yelana and the star heart. His expression shifted from confidence to something approaching fear. "Stop her," he commanded his troops. "Destroy the pedestal." As the Corruptor soldiers advanced, the outpost itself seemed to respond. Panels in the walls slid open, revealing ancient weapon systems that activated with a deep, resonant hum. Beams of concentrated energy lanced out, targeting the intruders with unerring precision. The tide of battle shifted instantly. The Corruptors found themselves under attack from all sides as the outpost's automated defenses came fully online. Several fell immediately, their advanced armor proving inadequate against the ancient Cthar weaponry. Zorex, realizing the danger, began a fighting retreat toward the breach. "This isn't over," he called back. "The star heart will be ours." As the last of the Corruptors withdrew, the chamber's defense systems powered down, leaving only the brilliant glow of energy surrounding Yelana and the star heart. Eric approached cautiously. "Yelana?" Her eyes opened, now blazing with the same internal light as the star heart. "I hear them," she whispered. "All of them. The voices of my ancestors. The knowledge of ages." "Is that good?" Jax asked, joining them. "It is overwhelming," she admitted, "but necessary." Her gaze focused suddenly, sharper. The outpost's sensors detect the Corruptor vessel preparing a main weapon targeting. They intend to destroy the entire structure rather than let us escape with the star heart. Can your ancient defenses stop them? Eric asked urgently. Yelana's expression was grim. Not at full power. The outpost has been dormant too long. Systems are degraded. She looked directly at Eric. There is a way, but it requires a choice. What choice? The Starheart can be used to power a displacement field, to move the outpost and everything within it to another location. But doing so would permanently alter the Starheart. Some of its knowledge, its memory, would be lost. Eric understood the terrible weight of the decision. It's your heritage, your people's legacy. I can't make that choice for you. Yelana's gaze softened. You fed me when I was starving, Eric Holland. You took me in when I had nowhere to go. In our oldest traditions, that makes you as much my people as any Cthar by birth. The chamber shuddered as the first barrage from the corruptor vessel impacted the outpost's outer defenses. We're out of time, Jax warned, checking his scanner. Shields at 60% and falling. Yelana looked at Eric. What shall we do, provider? Eric met her gaze steadily. Save what can be saved. Knowledge can be rebuilt. Lives cannot. She nodded solemnly, then turned back to the Starheart. Placing both hands on the crystalline sphere, she began speaking in the Cthar language, a flowing, musical cadence that seemed to resonate with the very structure around them. The Starheart's light intensified, and the pedestal beneath it began to reconfigure, components shifting and locking into new configurations. The energy field expanded, encompassing the entire chamber and beyond. Get back to the ship, Yelana ordered suddenly. The displacement is beginning. They ran through corridors now pulsing with energy, back toward the maintenance bay where the Nomad waited. Reese had the engines primed and ready. What the hell is happening out there? He demanded as they rushed aboard. No time to explain, Eric replied breathlessly. Just be ready for, well, anything. Yelana was the last to board, her movements sluggish, as if carrying a great weight. The connection to the Starheart had clearly taken a toll on her. The entire outpost began to vibrate at a frequency that set their teeth on edge. Through the viewports, they could see space itself seeming to bend and distort around the structure. Energy buildup off the charts. Jax reported from his console. Whatever's happening, it's happening now. A blinding flash enveloped everything. For a moment that seemed to stretch eternally, Eric felt as if he were everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. His consciousness expanded beyond the boundaries of normal perception. Then, with a sensation like reality snapping back into place, everything stabilized. Where the nebula had been, there was now the glittering expanse of an unfamiliar star system. A golden sun burned in the distance, and the curve of a ringed planet filled part of their view. Where are we? Eric whispered. Yelana, collapsed in a seat on the bridge, roused herself with visible effort. Haven, she said weakly, the last refuge of my people. The Starheart brought us home. The ancient outpost, now in orbit around the ringed planet, seemed to be repairing itself, energy flowing through previously dormant systems. And in the distance, other structures could be seen, similar outposts and what appeared to be a larger space station, all dormant but intact. There are others here? Jax asked in wonder. Not for many years, Yelana replied. But the sanctuary remains. Protected, hidden. From the corruptors by ancient technologies. What about the Starheart? Eric asked. Yelana's expression was a mixture of sadness and acceptance. Changed. Much of its knowledge was consumed to power our journey here. But its essence remains. She straightened with effort. And Ikari was transferred to me during communion. Not all is lost. Over the next few days, they explored the Haven system cautiously. The Nomad's engines had been strained by the displacement, but were functional. Jax was fascinated by the ancient Cthar technology and spent hours examining the systems of the outpost they now occupied. They discovered that Haven was more than just a hiding place. It had been designed as a seed vault of sorts, preserving not just Cthar knowledge, but aspects of their civilization that could, theoretically, be restored. On the third day, as Eric was helping Jax with repairs to the Nomad's damaged port thruster, Yelana approached. She had recovered much of her strength, though there was a new gravity to her bearing. The sanctuary's long-range sensors have confirmed that the corruptors cannot track us here, she informed them. We are safe for now. For now. Eric raised an eyebrow. They will not abandon their hunt, she said matter-of-factly. The Starheart, even in its diminished state, represents too great a prize. And now they know a Cthar survivor exists who can access its power. Eric set down his tools. So what's your plan? Stay here and rebuild? Wake up this ghost town somehow. Yelena considered his words. Perhaps in time. But first, there is something I must show you. She led Eric and Jax to a chamber deep within the outpost, one they hadn't yet explored. Inside was what appeared to be a technological garden. Crystalline structures growing from the floor and walls, pulsing with gentle light. At the center stood a pedestal similar to the one that had held the Starheart, but smaller. Atop it rested a fragment of the Starheart, perhaps a fifth of its original size, still glowing with internal light. What's left of the Starheart? Jax asked. Yelena nodded. Its core, still powerful, still containing the essence of what we were, and what we might be again. She turned to Eric. The ancient protocols are clear. As the last of the Cthar with communion training, the responsibility falls to me to protect it and use it wisely. Makes sense, Eric agreed. But I'm also bound to you. Provider, she continued, her golden eyes holding his. Our traditions do not allow me to break that bond. Eric sighed. We've been over this. That was just a ration bar. You don't need to. You misunderstand, she interrupted gently. I'm not speaking of obligation now. When I touched the Starheart, when I experienced communion, I saw many paths, many possibilities. Her voice softened. In all of them where my people survived and flourished. You were there, Eric Holland. Me? Eric blinked in surprise. I'm just a cargo hauler. Not exactly savior material. Yelena's expression was serious, but her eyes held warmth. You are more than you know. Your compassion when you shared your food. Your courage in the face of danger. Your wisdom in choosing preservation over power. She gestured to the fragment of the Starheart. These are the qualities my people need. The qualities I need to rebuild what was lost. Eric felt the weight of her words, the unexpected responsibility they represented. I don't know the first thing about restoring a civilization. Neither do I, she admitted with surprising candor. But I know that I cannot do it alone. Jax, who had been examining the crystalline garden with fascination, looked up. Well, count me in. This technology is incredible. I could spend a lifetime studying it and barely scratch the surface. And Reese? Eric asked. Yelena's whiskers twitched in what might have been amusement. The old pilot has already asked if there are any flight simulators in the outpost. He wishes to learn how Cthar ships maneuver. Eric laughed despite himself. Of course he does. He surveyed the chamber, the ancient technology pulsing with renewed life, then looked back at Yelena. So what now? Now, she said, we begin. There are other outposts to reactivate. Perhaps other survivors to find. Knowledge to recover. Her hand found his, her fingers intertwining with his own. A future to build. Eric considered the strange path that had led him here. From a desperate cargo hauler with nothing but a ration bar to his name, to standing in an ancient alien outpost with a civilization's rebirth potentially in his hands. All because he decided to share his food with a hungry stranger. A future, he agreed, squeezing her hand gently. I like the sound of that. The fragment of the Starheart pulsed brightly, as if in approval, casting their joined shadows against the wall of the ancient chamber, shadows that seemed, in that moment, to stretch far beyond the confines of the room, reaching toward possibilities yet unwritten.